Hello, lovely listener, and welcome to the Aardvark Swift podcast. I'm James Bowers, and I'm part of the marketing team here at Aardvark Swift. Throughout this series, we'll be chatting to game studios, initiatives, and industry professionals about all things video games, from tips on how to get into this line of work to studio cultures and projects to get involved in. This month, we speak to Duncan Kershaw, Neil McEwan, and Chris Lamb of Ballistic, an exciting studio working on a top-secret but revolutionary take on an established genre. They speak about their career histories, the origins of their team, and the key skills you need to make it into games. So I'll completely let you decide in the order you want to answer these questions. So what are your roles and what does a sort of typical day include for you?
All right, I suppose I'll answer first. So my name's Duncan, obviously. So I sort of look after general production and general management stuff at Ballistic Moon. So really, it's super broad. I can come in, start working on payroll. I can start working with these guys, looking at builds, working with our clients, looking at video game tax credit stuff, all the really sort of dry stuff. Well, certainly the most interesting thing for me is sitting down with these guys and really going through the builds and giving feedback to the team and the client as to how we think we should drive quality upwards.
What about yourself, Neil?
So, I'm Neil. I'm the creative director. So my typical day is downloading the build first thing and seeing what the latest and greatest stuff is and preparing my hit list for the day, like just touching base with the leads of each disciplines, the art director, the animation director, and the lead designer, and just talking through where we're at and where we're planning on going next.
Yeah, scoping out what you've got and where that needs to be at.
We tend to be very software driven in our approach. That's a key approach that culturally we take. It's all about, what's in the game now, what do we think we need to improve, and where do we go next?
And what about yourself, Chris?
So I'm head of technology, so I'm in charge of really anything from getting my hands dirty with code to making sure everything's running nice and smoothly. And we have everyone, except for us three here, working from home, so it's making sure all of that's running well. That's really the gist of what I do.
I think we all spend a ton amount of times on Slack and Teams. I think it's fair to say we're a big percentage of our days on video conference calls.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's everybody's 2020, hasn't it, so far? And is there a lot of overlap between you three then? Do you get together, obviously, on Teams and Slack? Do you get together quite regularly?
Yes.
Yeah, we try and support each other. One of the reasons we set this up is that we kind of come at things from, different angles, and we bounce stuff off of each other. We problem solve together quite a lot.
That's quite nice. It's quite sort of open and collaborative.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was interesting, really, because as everyone else in the world out there, everyone's been working remotely. And we tended to find that, logistically, we can make it work. We can build content, we can collaborate, we can talk. I think not being in the office, we really missed, the frequency of just talking and feedback and running ideas past people. As Neil said, we're all very different people, different skill sets. And I think we always feel that we're stronger together, which is why actually we ended up coming back to the office probably sooner than we should have done, really. But it's just the three of us, and we're all very far apart, and we're all socially distant.
We're going to get raided now, but we did follow all guidelines.
We did. But we just found working together in the same space was a massive win for us, and I think our team appreciated an aligned, consistent message that we always had working together.
Yeah, I was going to say, remote can have quite a lot of benefits, but the sort of in-person contact for sort of specific stuff and just making sure the lines of communication are clear, you sometimes can't beat it, can you? Obviously, games as an industry is quite exciting, but what was it that first sort of interested you about getting into games?
I always loved video games, just spent hours in my room on my Amiga and Mega Drive and my SNES playing games. And I used to project more content on it, narrative and story and write comics about what was going on with the characters outside of the game. But it never seemed like, it makes me sound old, but it wasn't a feasible career, quite small when I was younger. And then a guy I went to college with, he had a job at Microprose testing video games, and it just sounded like the best job in the world, But yeah, we went to college together, and I was actually working in an engineering firm. And he said, look, do you want to come here and do some, work experience sort of over the summer? So I took a couple of weeks off of work and went in and joined them. And because it was such a small industry then, you sat there with the coders and the designers and the producers, and you were one team. And so I got to learn like a lot about how games are made, and I just loved it. So I ended up just packing in stable job, as my mum called it, and taking a dip in my salary. But it was something that I really wanted to pursue without really knowing it was a viable option. I just loved doing it day to day.
I think that's probably the biggest change out of the last sort of 5-10 years at a push. Just the accessibility of getting into games and knowing that that's a sort of viable career path. Because I know even when I was at high school, 2009, I graduated, it never even crossed my mind that it could be anything more than just a hobby, because we just didn't have that kind of push or education to go for it. I'm quite pleased that that's changing.
I left school in 1988, so I'm really old. But, there was only a couple of other kids that I knew that played video games, and it wasn't so popular culture of playing video games. It was like that archetypal geek. So yeah, it's really opened up and broadened in the last couple of years, definitely.
I think for me, Neil's old, but I'm even older than Neil. Really, my introduction to the games industry was, the classic early 80s days in seedy, dark arcades in West Yorkshire. I'd cobble together 15p for the bus ride from my little village in Cullingworth to Keighley. And, I just spend all day in the arcades, watching people play classics like Tempest and Defender and, Star Wars and just games like that. And I was just hooked. I just couldn't believe that the magic that you got with these things. And I think, it became all a little bit more real for me when I got a Commodore 64 back in, 1983. I was just 13 years old. And that just sort of opened a door to a whole new type of creativity for me. And I went down the usual route of, typing in magazine, game listings that invariably never worked. And the funny thing for me was, we didn't have a lot of money as, when I was being brought up as a kid. And my mum managed to buy just the Commodore 64, but she didn't realize you also needed a way of saving things out, like a tape deck or, heaven forbid, a disk drive. So for the first couple of months of having a Commodore 64, I typed all the games in, and at the end of the day, I had to switch it off, which was pretty painful. But I'll tell you what, it definitely taught me, the value of software, and probably in a perverse way, constantly typing things in over and over and over again. It sort of forces it into your head. So that Lunar Lander game I typed in probably 100 times probably stuck with me. And I think, from there, many of my generation, you start coding in BASIC as a kid. I remember I wrote a game called Quest 64. And at the time at school, everyone copied tapes and would swap them. And I remember for me, the biggest buzz I got, my early days of a 13-year-old games programmer, was I swapped an adventure game I made for Twin Kingdom Valley, for a real proper game. And I got a call from the guy's mum later that night asking how you open the unoiled grate in the old wooden hut. And I got just such a buzz that someone played something I'd made. And I think that really put me on track to just keep on working in games. And as Neil said, at school, it wasn't a thing. People would say you want to be a games programmer. They looked at it like we're raving mad. And yeah, I ended up flunking all my exams. Wasn't really interested in any of that sort of stuff. I was just programming, taught myself assembly language, left school with basically no qualifications, much to the despair of my English teacher mother, and basically just said, I'm going to write games. And fortunately, I got my first game published in 1989, and the rest is history, so to speak.
Did you have computer studies at all at school?
Yeah, well, I remember. Yeah, that was funny. I got an unclassified grade in that because I wrote.
Yes, I've heard this story.
I wrote on the Commodore Plus/4 in assembly language. I wrote a basic word processor, but the teacher didn't understand assembly, so he gave me an unclassified. So I failed the exams because I'd written an assembly language word processor.
Wow.
So if I'd have done all the other nonsense everyone else had done, I'd have passed the exam. So. Yeah, that's why I probably left with a bit of bitterness towards academia. Probably fortified my resolve to be a games programmer, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, even the courses that I was doing for like GCSE, like 10 plus years ago, they were quite lacking in anything other than like Excel spreadsheets and flowcharts. There definitely wasn't a lot of focus on like game design or programming or anything like that. But I know kids now as young as primary school do a little bit of programming, don't they? So,
and that's the thing, back in the day, it was super accessible. It's like lots of kids got Commodore 64s and Spectrums. And, it didn't take long before, switching it on and you saw the flashing cursor and it just enticed you to do stuff. It made you want to type things in. And it made us all inquisitive as to, what this box with a keyboard could do. And I think certainly in the UK, it spawned, probably the strongest software development base in games at the time. I think that's why you see that strength in the industry now. I think it was really from the sort of Genesis early days where it just pushed us towards, creating our own content. It was great.
What about yourself, Chris? What got you interested in games?
Wow. So I'm not as old as these two, so you'll be happy to know that. My era started with the SNES. So, I mean, I remember my uncle had an old Atari, which I used to play around with a few games on those and had a tape deck, which is great. But I remember getting a SNES and absolutely falling in love with it. I love playing it. And I think that was probably the worst thing my parents could have done, because since then it's sort of completely changed my outlook on what I wanted to do. I mean, since then I've been playing on consoles like the N64, and then when we got a PC, I went completely mad for stuff on there. At school, kind of like Duncan, I mean, I was programming on these old Acorn PCs that the school had, and I was programming in Basic, making loads of text adventures and stuff in there, and like lovely little transitions I did in ASCII text. It was just really great to work on, and then especially at home with the PC. I was growing up in the age of games like Half-Life and Quake, and all those games were coming out, and I remember being completely obsessed with them, and I remember doing mods for them. I did open up a level editor, games like Unreal, the Unreal Tournament. I just went completely mad for it all. But I was doing things like making sound packs, I was modifying textures, and eventually I got to the point where I was actually looking at the source code, because I remember they released the source code for some of the games, and I went through those and I was modifying those, and I just really spiraled out of control. Similar to Duncan, I had fun at school. I mean, I think it's funny we talked about education earlier, because I found that as well when I was at school. I graduated, went to university in 2002. And the similar things there at school, I mean, they had a computer science class, but it didn't really satisfy me in that sense. I really wanted to work on things like games. I actually made my own little side projects whilst I was there. My exams definitely suffered from working on all of this. Thankfully, everything worked out in the end. But that's how everything went for me.
The SNES was my first console as well. And to this day, Super Mario World and Star Wing are two of the best games ever.
Yeah.
So it's changed a bit now. Games didn't used to be a lot of people's first job. So how was it that you made your transition into the industry? I know we've already touched on with Neil giving up his quote unquote stable job. Yeah. But yeah, what was your sort of transition?
I went to university. I left school 2002. Went to university. I really working through because I did a computer science degree there. It was very dry, the usual stuff that you get off there, make a database, that sort of thing. But actually, in the meantime, I was still working on mods for games, and that was really the big thing for me. And as I progressed, actually, I went to a really good university where they did a master's course eventually for games programming. And so some of the undergraduate modules I did, a couple of the actual courseworks where I could actually write a game, which is really good. And I remember writing this. It's kind of similar to the original Unreal, where you had the editor and the game sort of as one, with just like a UI on top. And then when I went to the games course, I mean, there was just loads of stuff there that they were really obsessed with portfolio, which is really good. I wrote a little shooter that I made. I wrote little like networking games, table tennis, actually, funnily enough. This is before Rockstar did table tennis.
Table tennis was your idea.
Yeah, it was my idea. They stole it. But yeah, just loads of stuff like that. And then really, I was incredibly lucky, because we were told, I think it was about 40 people on our course, and we were told maybe 8 or 9 of you will get jobs.
Well, that's nice.
That's encouraging, yeah.
And we went to a Microsoft conference where there's all these other courses, and they said 25% of the people here may get jobs, because it's incredibly hard industry to get into. And I know we touched on it earlier. It is a lot easier to get into now, because there's just the opportunities people have weren't there even then. You could come in from modding, but now with the advent of Steam and all these other online services, it's really taken off. I went that way, and actually our course was really good. I think it ended up like something like 3/4 of our course, or perhaps even 90% of our course got jobs in the industry, which is really great. Yeah, I went straight from uni. It was really good, and I went into EA actually straight there. Brought my portfolio from university, and absolutely loved it.
I sort of look at I've had two sort of careers in games. The first one was games programmer, down the usual sort of route. First ropey game released in 89. I spent 4 or 5 years working as a contract programmer, producing such greats as DJ Puff's Volcanic Capers. Yeah, all right. Other such classics. But I loved it. It was cliched literally in a bedroom, because I was in a bedroom, writing this stuff. And ended up setting up a little small studio with a great partner called Gerard Gawley of Sonic Graffiti. And that was like studio number 1 back in 91. And we lasted a couple of years writing stuff on the C64 Amstrad, Atari ST, all that sort of stuff. When I started to transition my career, I went to Codemasters as an in-house programmer. I soon realized I was nowhere near as good as the other guys that were proper programmers. And really with the transition of 2D to 3D, I probably realized my days were numbered as a coder. finished off writing music drivers for the Game Gear and Master System for them. And one day, Richard Darling strolled down, looked at me and said, "Hey, you look fairly organised. Do you want to be a producer?" And I went, "Yeah, all right then." You know, the one big tool I bought was a sports jacket, because Paul Ransom, my boss and mentor at the time, wore a really nice sports jacket. So the following week I came in a sports jacket, and that was it. I was a producer. That's really when my sort of second career started, and loved it ever since.
Your advice is everyone should get a sports jacket.
Absolutely.
Yeah, radiates authority.
What is a sports jacket?
Well, it's a nicely tailored, single-breasted number. Yeah.
Very fancy. So we've kind of just touched on this then. I was going to ask what had attracted you to your specific disciplines. So for you, Duncan, it was sort of the change from 2D to 3D that kind of made you reconsider the direction.
Well, yeah, it made me realise I was a fairly rubbish programmer, in all honesty. But I think it's funny because I sort of transitioned fairly sort of gently from a single programmer writing music drivers that were really sort of given to other engineers to help integrate into their team. So I sort of transitioned towards offering a service, if you like, to being sort of a techie type of producer. But I sort of moved away from just writing stuff on my own and spending more time working with the other guys in the studio. And I found I really liked that. I found it was really interesting just sort of stepping back, helping to sort of stitch together a couple of engineers and an artist and, designer to help build a game. And that was really when I started to see, you get a different level of satisfaction overseeing a team than you do, just building content yourself. So that was sort of the transition to me. And then, 5 years after that, it just drops off your CV that you were ever a programmer. And probably a lot of people, don't really know that part of my background, although these tools say I bang on about it all the time. But I actually still write for the 64, believe it or not. I actually still write demo stuff.
Please don't ask too many questions on Sunday morning.
Yeah, I'll put a link to one of them on our website.
Yeah.
Right at the bottom.
Yeah.
What about yourself, Neil? What attracted you to your discipline?
Yeah, so, like I said, I started as a tester, and the natural progression in those days was producer. I worked in Microprose for a while, and then I think the last game I worked on was Grand Prix 3 with Jeff Crammond. And EA actually got a Formula One license, and someone I knew started there in sunny Guildford. So he was looking for an assistant to help him out on the PC side of things. I was a PC gamer and I'd been working on PC games. So, yeah, I went to EA as an assistant producer. And then, unlike Duncan, and he'll probably attest to this, I'm not very organised.
Yeah, I can attest to that.
I was just naturally drawn to the creative side and the design side of things. So I really started to study that area and offer more input in those areas. And actually, it was just as the PSP and the Nintendo DS was coming out. And it was great because EA, they kind of backed PSP as the big one. And that's where all their focus went, all the internal development. The DS stuff and Nintendo stuff was just outsourced, which was a great proving ground for me because I started to work with small developers. I could lead all aspects of the game from a design and creative point of view, and it was a great learning ground for me. Working on DS games, Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, which is one of the games that I'm most proud of. Basically, my game, I could own everything, and EA wasn't looking at it. Felt as though they weren't looking at the other games, if you ever played those. But anyway, but I'm really proud of what I did there, and it gave me some space, to learn my craft. And then it kind of got to a point where actually Alex and Fiona from Criterion joined the studio, and I started working for them. They kind of radically changed my outlook on how games are made, Previously to that, I was trying to replicate the other individuals at EA that were successes, and I was trying to be more like them. And they really opened my mind to the best thing you can do is be yourself and believe in yourself, which was amazing, which was a real moment for me. So then I decided to leave EA and go to a small developer as a game director, cut my teeth doing it properly.
Yeah, that sounds quite nice, being able to sort of work for EA but still have the creative freedom to experiment a little.
EA is a great company, right? And I'm not sure if we'll cover this, but I've been back 2 or 3 times. I've done multiple tours, but it feels as though it's hard to climb in an organization. They pigeonhole you into an area and that's it. I kind of felt as though I had to go away and prove myself. And actually, confidence is such a big thing, right? I had to build my own confidence up. So, yeah, leaving there and then going back multiple times, there was some amazing talent in that studio, It definitely at the time, I think I started around the same time as Duncan, we were in the Bullfrog studio, and there was a lot of the old Bullfrog guys still hanging around, and they were hiring the best people in the industry at the time. There was so much talent in that studio; it was unbelievable. So yeah, just to be around those guys, the Bullfrog guys, definitely, who I admired and played their games. People that actually worked on Syndicate was, I was in awe.
Yeah, it's not surprising as well to hear that EA kind of put focus on the sort of Sony line of handhelds. Because, I mean, personally, I think they're quite underrated. I think the PSP and the PS Vita were really good little machines, but didn't seem to have the legs, unfortunately.
They really are, and I still play it now and again. Loco Roco and Patapon and those games are just so good and so creative, right? All the indie games that went onto them as well, Shovel Knight and games like that. At the time, EA was very graphics, visually focused, so that's kind of what they thought. That's the areas they wanted to push, rather than, okay, well, what can we do with, on the DS with the touch screen and, the dual screens? And that's interesting from a design point of view, right? It's kind of like VR in many ways. It's like, it was uncharted waters and really interesting from a design and creative point of view.
I think that's one of the first times I met you, Neil, wasn't it, in Bullfrog? It was funny because, I was actually hired by EA. So I was an EA guy looking after sort of sister product of FIFA. From an EA perspective, it was really funny. We've seen all these, incredibly talented Bullfrog guys. But, working on sports games, you tend to be focused on delivery and structure and all the rest of the stuff. And we sort of tended to look down our nose on them a little bit because, we always knew we'd ship our games, whereas those guys, who knows when it would ever come out. So it was a really funny, interesting time, when we were working there. EA sort of sports-focused teams were working, alongside the far more creative Bullfrog guys. It was a really, really interesting mix. I really enjoyed that time.
Yeah, it sounds like a really good environment. What was it that attracted you to programming, Chris?
I think I always really enjoyed it. I was looking at stuff way back at school, like I mentioned, the Acorn PCs. I absolutely loved the concept of, just constructing something. You think about it, really, you can really make anything you want. And I think that drew me to it. And I went from writing little text adventures to write little games where you run around. I think I wrote in school, I wrote like a little home invasion top-down thing where you ran around, you like a resident in a house get to run around and stop people.
True, stop it. Telling everyone our ideas.
It's a 20-year-old idea. Come on, let's go. And it was loads of things like I wrote a first-person shooter, I wrote that table tennis networking game. I wrote all sorts, really. I just loved the concept, just taking something from scratch and just building it to something that really enjoyed. And I think that you see it with everything now. It's just the job in general. It's just that concept of taking something and building something out of it, especially with multiple people working it as well, and seeing where you can go with it. And that's what really attracted me to it. I remember, like I said to you previously, games are looked at, looking at all the source code as well, seeing how other people have made it, what ways you can make it better, everything to do with that. And I don't think I've ever not loved doing that. Stuff working on now, I just love looking at stuff and saying, actually, how can I make this better? What can I do with this? Like going to uncharted waters as well. That's also great fun.
I bet it is. I mean, I quite like just the scope of being able to world build, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Even me, who's got zero technical skills, I've created little text-based adventure games in Twine just because it's accessible. But yeah, being able to actually program something and create whatever you want, I can imagine crippled with choice.
It's got like a lower level version of Lego, really. You think about Minecraft and how popular that is, constructing everything there, but then you think about code and it's just practically limitless.
So obviously this will change a little bit depending on studio, but not an overly large amount. If you were going to hire someone into, not your roles and replacing yourselves, but if you're going to hire someone into a role similar to yours, what sort of skills, sort of software competencies, experience would make a candidate sort of really stand out to you?
Yeah, I'll answer that. Well, I'm sure you couldn't find someone as good as me, but say we'll try and find someone who's 50% good.
Certainly not having a good look.
When we talk to people and interview people, something that I really look for is definitely in design is a passion. Someone who's willing to push the boundaries and not accept the norm. A lot of designers that I speak to, they're just fanboys, right? They've played everything and they've created their own corners, their own boundaries, which I really don't like. Right. We want to create stuff that's new. This is one of the reasons, we're working with Chris, is that I can take these crazy ideas to him and then he'll be more practical and he'll help me actually break it down, right? And we derive the experience together. We've always said, the three of us, that we're not interested in just warm bodies in seats. We want people that are going to really contribute, that don't accept the norm in many ways, that want to create something that's really new. And Duncan is making faces at me now. Chris has done. But it's true, I look for passion. Even if they don't have the experience or the skills, you can kind of see that they'll work it out, or they'll teach themselves, or they'll research it until they do. We really try to facilitate that kind of, person, really.
Quite nice sort of leaving scope for growth. Like there might be 85% there, but you can see in them that they'll get there with maybe a little support, or they'll get there with a little bit more research.
With people I've worked with before, we've hired people that we've all worked with before. We hired someone who was an artist before, but I could see that he had a real talent for design. And so we approached him and, we've put him into a senior design role. So far we've seen the results from that. He's just really passionate, right? And so it's really important to have that drive for me and to love what you do. This isn't just a 9-to-5 job. I'm not saying we crunch because we don't, but if you really care about something, it sticks with you, and it's something from a creative point of view you're thinking about all the time. It's about people that want to push forward, I think, and create new experiences. We want to create games that emotionally resonate with people and mean something to them, aren't just disposable and then they move on to the next thing. We want them to really play something and surprise them and, emotionally engage in a way that they haven't done before. I just remember back to when I was a kid and I was playing these games, and they were the Codemaster games for $1.99, and if you had a lot of money, you'd buy one for $2.99. And some of them used to really stick with me and really meant a lot to me. The artwork on the cover and
like DJ Buff's Volcanic Capers, that type of
that
stuff.
sort of thing. I don't think I ever played that one. But yeah, just, it's like movies and books and TV programs, stuff that really sticks with you, and it changes you in a way, hopefully in a good way.
Yeah, it's really nice to hear that it's more than just what that person can do on paper. It's a lot more involved of, what's the drive behind it? What's the passion? Do they have the capability to grow in the role? Yeah, that's really nice to hear.
Yeah, and also, let's not forget, are they a nice person, right? Do they fit culturally with us, right? That shouldn't be underestimated. You don't want having to ride someone all the time.
No, that makes sense. What about yourself, Duncan? What do you look for?
It's interesting, just on the last point that Neil made about they've actually got to be quite nice. I think nice is really underestimated and undervalued. Producer role is really difficult. I know, lots of team members, and certainly I have lots of conversations with Neil and Chris about when we look on bring on board a producer, what do we want that person to bring on board? And I think,
Sports jacket.
That's certainly one.
Jacket,
yeah. It's certainly the sports jacket or jacketette. I think, the first thing is, they need to be a decent person, right? We're not looking for egos. We're not looking for jerks. We want someone that's going to come in and do the best for the team. And it's sort of a lesson I learned in my career. When I started off at EA, it was all about the plan. It was sort of my plan, really, and the team sort of was squeezed around that. And that was sort of mentality that maybe we were sort of brought up in those days, all waterfall. You've got to hit the dates. It's all very linear and squeeze it through the pipe. But I think now we want someone that's really going to work with the team and bring the best out in the team, encourage them, balance risk with innovation. It's a cliche, but it's making sure that the team, it's their plan, right? And the producer's there to help steward the team around this plan, but it's a plan that's owned by the team. It's a difficult role, a producer, lots of different types. There are different skill sets that come in at different stages of development. Finally, producers are a very different beast to someone that's going through concept, but the biggest thing we want is a decent person that's honest, that's honourable, that's upfront, that just isn't going to play stupid political games and always put the team first. It's always about the team, and we do whatever is needed to set the team up for success. That's really what we're looking for.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it's quite hard to quantify it, but you kind of know it when you see it, don't you? I suppose you don't want someone who's not nice in any role, but I suppose, especially for a producer, when you're kind of like the ultimate facilitator and you're there kind of like the focal point of communication, you don't want that person to be a barrier.
Again, I'm biased because, sort of producer background. It's a difficult role. You're balancing ultimately the needs of the project. You're balancing the needs of a client. You're making sure the team are all working together. You've got to make sure that, the likes of Neil are looked after from a creative standpoint, and make sure there's time in there to mitigate technical risks and all the rest of it. And it's a real sort of juggling act, but you just got to make sure that, that individual can keep calm, keep things nice, keep things pleasant, keep a good atmosphere, and just keep encouraging the team. And again, it's all about the team. It's making sure that they're set up to do what they need. And that was a lesson I really learned, that it's not your plan as a producer. It's to make sure it's a plan that enables a team to be as successful as they possibly can be.
What about yourself, Chris? What do you look for?
Well, I'm irreplaceable, so that's fine. For a programmer, the cliche is is excellent logical, critical thinking skills, and it's a cliche, but it's incredibly true. Someone comes to you with a problem, immediately you think, actually, how am I going to solve that? That's what I love to see from people is you give them a problem and say, right, how are you going to solve it?